Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Brahmamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotushata Shishmat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, text number 20. Okay. Snigdha Smita Avalokena Vacha Piyusha Kalpaya Charitena Anavadyena Shri Niketana Cha Atmana Snigdha Smitavalokena Snigdha Smitavalokena Vacha Piyusha Kalpaya Charitrinanavadyena Shri Niketena Chatmana Snigdha Smitavalokena Vacha Piyusha Kalpaya Charitrinanavadyena Shri Niketena Chatmana Snigdha Smitavalokena Vacha Piyusha Kalpaya Charitrinanavadyena Shri Niketena Chatmana. Please repeat. Some water. Mataji? Snigdha, gentle. Smita avalokena, by a glance with a sweet smile. Vacha, by words. Piyushakalpaya, compared to nectar. Charitrena, by character. Anavadyena, without flaw. Shri, fortune. Niketena, residence. Cha, and. Atmana, by his transcendental body. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. Purport. In the previous verse, it is described that Lord Krishna, being situated in the truths of Sankhya philosophy, is detached from all kinds of matter. In the present verse, it is described that he is the residence of the goddess of fortune. These two things are not at all contradictory. Lord Krishna is detached from the variegatedness of the inferior nature, but he is eternal bliss. He is eternal blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature. He is in eternal blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature, or his internal potency. One who has a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand this distinction between the external and internal potencies. In the Bhagavad Gita, the internal potency is described as para prakriti. In the Vishnu Purana also, the internal potency of Vishnu is described as Parashakti. The Lord is never detached from the association of Parashakti. This Parashakti and her manifestations are described in the Brahma Samhita as Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabihi. The Lord is eternally joyful and cognizant in the taste derived from such transcendental bliss. Negation of the variegatedness of the inferior energy does not necessitate negation of the positive transcendental bliss of the spiritual world. Therefore, the Lord's gentleness, his smile, his character, and everything related to him are all transcendental. Such manifestations of the internal potency are the reality, of which the material shadow is only a temporary representation, from which everyone with proper knowledge must be detached. Om Agyana Timurandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupakada Kadah Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shivashakan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Pandu Chigatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishna Bhanushite Devi Pranamami Hare Pare Vanshakapatu Bhishra Kripasan Nubi Bacha Patita Nam Bhavani Abhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putuleshmati Bhakti Vikasa Swamin Itinamane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putuleshmati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Itinamane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunivari Pashchati Desha Tarane Bhutir Mahadbiri Mafpur Vibhur Nirmayashati Musha Purasha Bung Degunan Shudasha Shudashatmaka Solanga Bhagavan Vachamsime. So, translation, once more, he was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. So, Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he makes the point in general, how everything related to Krishna, as being described here, is all completely spiritual, it's not material at all. And he says, he gives the division paraprakriti and the inferior energy. So everything, and he sums it up at the end. Therefore, the Lord's gentleness, his smile, his character, and everything related to him, Krishna, are all transcendental. So obviously, and he quotes Brahma Samhita here as well. Everything is ananda chinmaya rasa pratipavitabihi. There's another verse there. Eko piyaso rachayitum jagaranda kotim. He's the translation of that, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where he translates as he's an undifferentiated entity, meaning there's no Krishna. In other words, Krishna is spiritual, and everything related to Krishna is also spiritual. It's not different like everything is in the material world. In the material world, obviously, the spiritual soul is a material body. There's a difference, but it's not so with Krishna. The beginning of the Brahma Samhita, that chapter, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha, as Srila Prabhupada is quoting here the English. He's completely spiritual, he's eternal, he's full of bliss. And specifically the spiritual, Chit Shakti. Krishna, everything in relation to Krishna is this, it's characterized by this Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bihi. Krishna himself, as Srila Prabhupada is writing here, he's eternally joyful and cognizant, as is everything related to him. So I wanted to connect this verse, actually, with a verse yesterday. I may repeat some points, but I was actually working on something, and I saw that Bhaktivikas Maharaj, this verse we read yesterday, he wrote something about this line here, which I want to connect to today's verse. Actually, these two things come together. So he points out this, for those of you who were in class yesterday, we read about Krishna. He was conforming to the societal customs in Dwarka. And so, Bhaktivikas Swami, he makes the point here, he writes that this line here, Loka Veda Patanugaha, you could potentially take this as, if you read it literally, that is, it means that Krishna simultaneously conformed to the path of the Vedas and the worldly path. In other words, he followed Vedic custom, and he followed, you could postulate like this, that he followed worldly culture, a worldly custom, and he also followed Vedic custom. But His Holiness Bhaktivikas Swami was saying otherwise, that he was explaining that the word lokika, which comes to loka here in this verse, taken within the context, it refers to Vedic culture specifically. Therefore, we see Srila Prabhupada is giving his translation that strictly in conformity with the Vedic customs of society. And then today's verse comes, which is immediately after this. So Krishna was in Dwarka, living, conforming to the Vedic customs of society. That was his behavior. That was his mode of living. And then today's verse, it says, he was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, his usual gentle smile, etc. And then Srila Prabhupada makes the point, all of this is spiritual. Everything related to Krishna is spiritual. His smile is spiritual, his dress is spiritual, his behavior is spiritual, and his conformance to the Vedic culture, his culture is also spiritual. So I kind of want to speak on this a little bit today, because that's kind of what I'm working on right now. So Krishna himself practices what is called Vedic culture. Actually, what we call Vedic culture is Krishna's culture. It's not different from Krishna, as it originally is in its original pure form. And these aspects of Vedic culture that Krishna is exhibiting, meaning his behavior, just like Krishna is famously respectful towards the Brahmanas. This respect towards the Brahmanas is not some facet of some material culture. It's an internal, it's Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. It's completely spiritual. So Krishna himself, we heard yesterday, Kalki Prabhu was making that point, Krishna himself follows the Vedic culture. He does so to teach us, but also that's his natural mode of living. That's just how he lives in the spiritual world. So both things are, Krishna accomplishes many things at once. So by his doing so, Krishna both enjoys being within the Vedic culture, and he teaches us to follow the Vedic culture in different ways. In many different ways, some were narrated yesterday. One, Srila Prabhupada makes the point, Krishna himself accepted a guru, which is one of the most key aspects of Vedic culture. Obviously, the core of Vedic culture is Krishna consciousness, which necessitates acceptance of a guru. So to show this, Krishna himself followed this. Krishna bows before his superiors. You'll see, even in the Bhagavatam, I'm pretty sure it comes there. Or Bhagavatam, definitely. We hear descriptions in the 10th canto of Lord Krishna bowing down before his parents, touching their feet, Vasudeva and Devaki. And elsewhere, particularly I just finished reading Mahabharata, and there's many descriptions there of Krishna showing respect to those who are even senior to him in age. For instance, he respects Maharaj Ugrasena, even though Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Maharaj Ugrasena and Maharaj Yudhishthira as well, specifically Yudhishthira Maharaj was emperor of the world, he showed respect to them due, even though Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Lord Chaitanya, when he came, he similarly offered respects to his parents. He respected his elders, Advaita Acharya, as well as even when he became elder. Of course, famously, there's the descriptions of Nimai Pandit, who was, you could say, characteristically misbehaved, I guess you could say, or puffed up, so that's transcendentally puffed up. But still, and specifically in that age of Nimai Pandit, we see him defeating Keshav Kashmiri, which was a great, not necessarily scholar, but poet, scholar of grammar, you can say, a very disciple of, devotee of Saraswati, actually, Saraswati Devi, the goddess. So he was benedicted. He had special, the favor of Saraswati. He was able to compose very nice poetry. He composed, I think it was 100 verses in praise of Ganga immediately off the bat. And then Lord Chaitanya, Nimai Pandit, he pointed out, he was able to immediately identify, he remembered all the verses, and he was able to point out within those verses that the Pandit just recited from the top of his head, he was able to point out the various poetic defects within those verses. So, it's quite a humiliating situation for Keshav Kashmiri. But still, in conformance with Vedic culture, Lord Chaitanya didn't humiliate him. He didn't make him feel as if an idiot before all his disciples, Lord Chaitanya's disciples assembled there. Nor when Lord Chaitanya defeated Prakashananda Saraswati, the Mayavadi sannyasi who we have on the wall over there, did he do likewise. He always afforded them respect. Even in the meeting, when Lord Chaitanya entered the meeting of those Mayavadi sannyasis, you see how you can learn so much culture actually from the Chaitanya Charitamrita itself. It's laden with the culture. All Vedic literature, but specifically Lord Chaitanya, is showing so many things. Lord Chaitanya, he entered that assembly, he showed humility, he considered himself a Lord Sannyasi, having taken initiation, whereas they had taken initiation in the, what was that line? I forget. Saraswati line? Something like that. Saraswati line? Prakashananda Saraswati's line. Saraswati line. Saraswati line. Whereas, which is considered, Srila Prabhupada writes, that's the highest, considered the highest, most respected, highest category of sannyasis, whereas Lord Chaitanya took initiation in the Bharati line, which is considered a lower grade of sannyas. So he didn't want to sit with those sannyasis who were of a higher grade. And he sat in a place where people actually wash their feet, which in Vedic culture, that's quite a filthy place, actually. Nobody would dare, especially a sannyasi who is like an emblem of cleanliness. But out of humility, Lord Chaitanya is doing so. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, similarly too, when Lord Chaitanya defeated him, he didn't make a mockery of him. He always afforded respect to those senior to him, either by age, not necessarily spiritual status, but societal status too. So Lord Chaitanya, both Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, whenever the Lord comes, he always follows the Vedic culture. And when he breaks elements of the Vedic culture, or regulations, we can say, of the Vedic culture, it's with a specific purpose. Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna book, when it comes to the killing of Kamsa, so Krishna killed his maternal uncle, which is completely, by conventional standards, worldly standards, is abominable. You don't do such a thing. Srila Prabhupada writes, when Krishna killed Kamsa, he killed his maternal uncle, which is against the regulations of Vedic injunctions. Although Krishna is independent of all Vedic injunctions, he violates the Vedic injunctions only in inevitable cases. So only in exceptional cases does Krishna transgress Vedic principles. He himself sets forth Vedic principles, and he only transgresses it when needed. We were hearing yesterday, of course, the different avatars follow differently. We were hearing yesterday, Kalki Prabhu was making the point that Lord Ramachandra, he followed very, very strictly. Krishna, sometimes he bends the rules a little bit. But this Vedic culture, these Vedic, sorry, could you turn that on? I want to read one thing. These Vedic principles, it's set forth by Krishna, it's followed by Krishna, and again this point, because it's followed by Krishna, it's coming from Krishna, it's spiritual, it's essentially spiritual. This is a very, very important point to understand, because generally, we see the devotee community, there's many people will think otherwise and have many different opinions on what is culture, what is necessary in Krishna consciousness. But here is a text. This is Sanatana Goswami writing in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So I guess this is somewhere describing the, I believe it's Gopal Kumar is talking about here. Yeah, Gopal Kumar. So I'll just read the translation and the commentaries from Gopi Puranadhana Prabhu, who's translated Sanatana Goswami's own commentary in his own book. So this is Sanatana Goswami. In that realm, beyond the reach of all the demigods, Goloka Vrindavan, he's talking about, planetary rulers and personal attendants of the Supreme Lord, I saw, Gopakumara speaking, I saw that life was going on just as here in this Aryavarta country and Partavarsha on earth. The sun was rising, and the other natural events were taking place every day in the sky. And on the land, the people were speaking and behaving in the same way as here. I was extremely stunned by extreme astonishment, and immersed in an ocean of ecstatic rasa. So the key point here is that Gopakumara went to Goloka Vrindavan. He saw the spiritual world, Krishna's abode. And he says that life that is going on in Goloka Vrindavan is the same as that life that he saw in Aryavarta. Aryavarta means north central India. So I'll read the commentary. Demigods like Surya and Chandra, this is also Sanatana Goswami, it's just his own commentary on his own verse. Planetary rulers like Indra and Brahma, and even associates of Lord Narayana, like Sri Garuda, cannot enter Goloka. Gopakumar, preparing his student for descriptions of life there, now gives him a glimpse of how Goloka resembles Vrindavan on earth. Gopakumara saw for himself that the environment and culture of Goloka were just like those of Aryavarta, north central India, refined in civilization, where Vrajabhumi is located. What he saw in the sky, Divyam, and on the ground, Bhomim, could hardly be distinguished from the common experience of life on earth. This sight amazed him. He could now perceive the spiritual reality of rasa as something tangible, and the ecstasy of that rasa at once filled his heart and overflowed and left him swimming in an ocean of the nectar of devotion. So this point that what he observed in north central India, Aryavarta, Gopakumara, is the same that he saw in Goloka Vrindavan. So, in other words, this Vedic culture we find in India, Indian culture, it's not originally, it's completely spiritual. What is practiced in, specifically, it's said here, in northern India, that's found in Goloka Vrindavan itself. Now, granted, put a disclaimer here. Obviously, things have changed and things have degraded a little bit. Kali Yuga has degraded the culture some, but nonetheless, that original Vedic culture and those practices, which still can be found within India, they have their original prototype within the spiritual world. Some devotees think that many different, as Kalki Prabhu was making the point yesterday, that Vedic culture extends to just worshiping the deity and the rituals we perform up there. But it's not just that. Everything, culture is as much as it is in the details, as much as in the details as in the more, you could say, overt things. Deity worship is a very overt thing. But eating, taking things with the right hand only is a more subtle detail we can say. But it's not that these subtle details aren't spiritual. It's not that they're mundane or they don't matter, in other words. Everything related to Krishna is spiritual. We see Krishna himself, the avatars of God, also following these things. Similarly, culture can mean many different things. Generally, at least in English, we say Vedic culture. The more precise term is Samskriti, which refers to that culture, for lack of a better word, of samskaras. That's mode of living which is defined by the Vedic literatures and defined by processes of purification. Just like the beginning of life is within Vedic cultures defined by Garbhadhana samskara. So similarly, there's many different samskaras that people that are undertaken within Vedic culture, and etc. like this. So generally, this word Samskriti, it's a more, you could say, precise word. Culture within English, it can mean two things. Generally, we say somebody is cultured when they have very high behavior, when they are refined in character, you can say. And then there's the sort of sociological definition, which is like a sort of culture. Just like there's American culture, there's Western culture, there's German culture, etc. like that. So different definitions of culture. Of course, in the West, generally, the idea of culture is, the Western conception is just reserved for a few elite few who practically their culture is just following some silly, abstruse rules that don't make any sense at all. Things like when you eat, you have to have the forks and knives on one side, and you don't tip a bowl of soup towards you, you tip it away from you, and you don't put your elbows on the table, and when you wear a dress, you wear it this way. A bunch of meaningless rules, basically, and if you follow these rules, you're considered very, very cultured. So it's only, but practically, we see very few people in society following this. Within Vedic culture, it's not like this. Of course, there's brahmanas, and brahmanas follow a certain degree of cleanliness, purity, etc. like that. But you'll find culture, Vedic culture, even among principles of culture, even among Shudras, for instance. Even among Chandalas, you'll still find elements of Vedic culture. It's not that they're complete barbarians. So this word culture is not exactly a perfect fit, although generally as Srila Prabhupada did, we use this word Vedic culture. It's sort of like a catch-all. So culture, it comprises many different things, even to the extent that we're not even aware of it, particularly for those who have been raised in Western culture. Culture can dominate your mind to such an it shapes how you think, act, practically every single aspect of your life, to the point where you're not even conscious of what you do. It's just like so many different things. Even to your thought processes, just like we hear of, within just everyday conversation within the West, we talk of like traumatic experiences, inferiority complexes. But the thing is, these are constructs which have arisen within Western culture specifically. We never really think to question, are these things actually, do they have any tangible meaning to it? Or is it just some speculation somebody has cooked up? So, but we can think in these ways. In other words, we think somebody is a very balanced person, and elsewhere we think somebody's very fanatical. But generally, I don't see Srila Prabhupada, for instance, using these words. He may have used the word fanatical a little sometime. Generally, within his books at least, within Shastra, you find the word strict. Not so much, I don't know of an exact synonym of fanatical, something like that. Generally, the word strict is used. So even concepts like this I don't mean to get into semantics, but I'm just making the point how a culture can shape the way you think about your whole worldview, even unconsciously. It's just like, I've been raised in so many different things. In the West, everywhere we have AC. You were saying yesterday in Europe, you were laying how in Europe not many places have AC. In India, it's very rare to have AC. It's also rare to have AC. In India, practically, there's no heating. They may have AC, but there's heating is very, very less. So if it's cold, you just deal with it. That's life there. That's the culture. You never think, oh, well, what are we, I need to turn on the heater or something. But in America, because of the culture, my own cultural conditioning is such that, if it's cold, whatever, I have to adjust the thermostat. If it's hot, I have to adjust the thermostat. It's a problem with the thermostat. So, of course, these are just various examples, but it just gives you an idea how much culture can influence your whole mode of thought. Not just thinking, the way you act, the way you dress is a very important part. Some people will argue differently that dress is not important, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, Gora Bhakata Priya Vesha Dadhana Tilaka Tulasi Mala Shobhamana. He says, I will put on the garb that is dear to the devotees of Lord Gaurasundar and wear the 12 Vaishnava tilak markings on my body and beautiful beads of tulasi wood around my neck. So Krishna himself shows that Krishna himself has a particular dress. He dresses like that. Lord Chaitanya, he also chooses to accept that dress. And then this dress, this verse, this song, it comes in a section about elements favorable for pure devotional service. Just like we have the song Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu. All these things, this list of items that are favorable for devotional service. Similarly, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he gives this item, dressing in a mode that's pleasing, that adorning that dress, which is dear to Lord Chaitanya, dhoti, etc., like that, marking the body with tilak. So these are also aspects of culture, which are important. The point has been made many different times, based upon how you dress. Your dress, accompanying your dress, comes a particular mentality. Just like, when, to give a more tangible example, when Frederick comes here and he's in his police uniform, we act with him in one way, or even if it's not grossly there, we think of it, he's a cop. And when he comes just, dressed like normal, jeans, etc., like that, we think of him, it's a more relaxed mood, even though it may not be overtly expressed. But the dress definitely has an effect. Similarly, on our own mentality. I don't know if any of you have experience, but when you go to a job interview, or just when you dress up nicely in suit and tie, you have that particular dress, because it's more formal, more refined, we can say, it carries a particular mentality. Whereas when you dress, in pajamas or the clothes you sleep in, that also carries a particular mentality. So the dress you have, you adorn, you adopt, it carries a particular mentality. So it's also a very important aspect. So all these things, this is just summing up, all these things, these culture shapes our consciousness and our thoughts and our mode of action in a very, very important way. Therefore, the Vedic culture is incredibly important for devotees to adopt. I was thinking about this. I had seen the verse I was going to speak on, and I decided, anyway, I'm working on this right now, so I want to speak on this. I noticed every single devotee, in practically the last 5 classes, they mentioned something about Vedic culture, in one way or another. So it's integral. Vedic culture, the culture of Krishna consciousness, cannot be separated from the so-called religious aspect of Krishna consciousness. Western people, the people of a Western background, we think like that, because in the West, there's culture, there's science, there's religion, there's philosophy, all these things are divided, but it's not so in the Vedic paradigm. It's not like that. So to try and divorce the culture that comes from Krishna consciousness, from it doesn't even make sense in my mind, from the process of Krishna consciousness, it doesn't make sense at all. It's just like I was saying here, dressing in dhoti, etc., that dress which is favored by Lord Chaitanya, it's favorable for Krishna consciousness. It's linked with the process of Krishna consciousness. It's spiritual. So we can't, unlike some people would argue, we can't divorce these things from the core practices of Krishna consciousness. Of course, the core practices are there. I'm not saying that. Core practices of Krishna consciousness are hearing and chanting about Krishna. So many people in India, they wear a dhoti every single day. They may be even completely envious of Krishna. So the central point is still the central point, hearing and chanting about Krishna in a favorable way. But there's all these other aspects which can further affect our purification. Other aspects of Vedic culture, why it's important. All aspects of Vedic culture, it nourishes, first, all aspects of Vedic culture, they derive from Krishna's pastimes. Everything we know, Vedic culture, the aspects of Vedic culture we practice, we do so because it's practiced by Krishna. I made this point, just like eating with the right hand, taking with the right hand, respecting seniors, etc. We do these things because they have their place in Krishna's pastimes. They're spiritual phenomenon. And they nourish the exchange of rasa, as we're hearing here in today's verse, that this Parashakti and her manifestations are described in the Brahma Samhita as Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabihi. So these things, the background, Krishna's lila, his pastimes, take place on a background of Vedic culture. And this Vedic culture, it serves to enhance all of Krishna's his pastimes, everything. From Chaitanya Charitamrita particularly comes to mind. You see so many different you see how devotees act with each other, the loving exchanges they have with each other. And those exchanges, they have a basis on Vedic culture. And even though, I'll get to that later. But even so, advanced devotees can appreciate rasa, but these exchanges have a basis in Vedic culture. Just like we're hearing here yesterday, Lord Krishna, he enjoyed life in Dwarka. But what's he doing in Dwarka? He's conforming with the Vedic customs of society. That's what he's doing in Dwarka. That's Krishna's lila. Therefore, devotees, Krishna wanted to play guitar and wear blue jeans in Dwarka, he could have done so, but he doesn't do so. Therefore, devotees, we aspire devotees aspiring to enter this divine Golokam, Vrindavan, Dwarka, etc., Krishna's eternal abode. Devotees don't particularly aspire to enter into a realm of where everybody wears sunglasses and blue jeans, etc., like this, some sort of so-called divine realm. So they cultivate these things in this lifetime. They cultivate adjusting themselves to Krishna's, just like we're trying to adjust our own mentality to become favorable to Krishna consciousness. Similarly, we should adjust our external actions to adopt that culture which is practiced in the spiritual world. It's not that immediately we're going to leave the body and we're attached to wearing blue jeans, playing guitar, and immediately, Krishna's he'll transform our mentality into some sitar player or something like this. So, based upon what we cultivate in this lifetime, we get those attachments, what we cling to into this lifetime, that will determine our next life. So if we're attached to Krishna's devotees, Krishna's culture, etc., like that, it's very favorable for our position. Whereas if we're attached to things which are not part of Krishna's culture, it's very dangerous for us, actually. If we're attached to playing guitar, which has no place in the spiritual world, we may come back to the material world just to do so. So it's very dangerous. Another point is that this Vedic culture is the original culture of both the soul and the world. It's of the world because Krishna originally gave it. And we understand, Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the Bhagavatam, formerly the world was under one flag, he writes like that. It was one banner, one nation. Bharat Maharaj, he was ruling everywhere. Vedic culture was predominant all over the world. We hear Srila Prabhupada, he says that in Gainesville, Brahmanas were conducting sacrifices in the forest there. There's one memory like that. So this culture was predominant everywhere. Only due to deterioration of this culture, have different cultures, we could say, German culture, etc., like that. German culture, Spanish culture, Mexican culture, American culture, they're all, you could say, corruptions of the original Vedic culture. Originally, what was there is Vedic culture. All these other things are corruptions. And even, not just, you could say, sociologically speaking, this Vedic culture is the culture of the soul. It's natural for the soul to to exist within the Vedic culture, which consequently means, in Goloka and Vrindavan, these things are followed, so, which consequently implies any liking for any aspect of non-Vaishnava culture is foreign to the soul itself, and is thus a contamination. In other words, to put it bluntly, if you're attached to Western, you could say Western dressed, Western music, Western whatever, that doesn't even necessarily have to be Western. Anything which does not have root in Vaishnava culture, it's a contamination in our Krishna consciousness, and it keeps us down here in the material world. So yeah, bluntly put, so it's very important to think that Indian culture, Vedic culture, has just emerged as one culture amongst many, and that we can adopt Western culture while rejecting so-called Indian culture. It actually just means to basically reject Shastra. It's a, you could say, cognitive dissonance, to use a Western term, of where you accept one part of Shastra, but you reject the other. You accept that, okay, Shastra is infallible, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but then you reject that Krishna originally set forth this culture. This culture was existing all over the world. It's a form of atheism, actually. It's an atheistic mentality. So we shouldn't cultivate this, nor should we associate with people of this mentality. Vedic culture is not dead; it's still living. Sometimes when we hear the word Vedic culture, at least myself, we think that culture is just Vedic culture was something that was existing, whatever, like 5,000 years ago when Maharaj Parikshit heard the Srimad Bhagavata, but it's still there. Of course, it's changed a little bit, and Kali Yuga has degraded things a little bit, but Vedic culture can still very much be found. Even within our temple, the temple Srila Prabhupada established to some extent is there. Particularly within India, it's found. Not so much the cities, more in the villages. Of course, that's changing now. More so within South India than North India. Of course, that's changing now too. But you find all over, just like it's customary, at least North India it seems more, for children to offer obeisance, to bow down before their parents, touch their feet, afford respect to their parents, etc. like that. People in South India, they're more of a, you could say, they have a sort of sense of gravity towards life. They have a mood of gravity towards life. They're very serious, very stoic, which means they're not, you could say, just, what's the word? Carefree, not exactly that word, but they don't have a frivolous attitude towards life as an aspect of Vedic culture. Of course, it's not that people in Vedic culture were just completely, they don't make jokes, but I'm just making the point. There's an idea that this human birth is very, very rare, and it has a purpose. So Vedic culture is very much intact. It's intact in different places, and different communities have it intact in different ways. As Kalki Prabhu was saying yesterday, you can, well, somebody was quoting yesterday, I believe it was a comment, I forget. You can take, Srila Prabhupada says, you can take even, you can pull a piece of gold even from an impure place. So we can learn Vedic culture even from those people who may not necessarily be Vaishnavas. Just like Mayavadis, still they imbibe, they preserve, they follow, and consequently they preserve many aspects of Vedic culture. It's not to say that we should accept their so-called speculations and deviant philosophy, but some things can be learned from studying such. And we see that, at least my own spiritual master, he's highlighted projects which practice very strictly Vedic culture, such as, was it Dharmashala? I believe it's called what was it? Dharmashala? That's the name of the place. In India, this community, Dharmasthala, this place, which we see aspects of Vedic culture being very, very followed very, very much. Even in Smarta families, I mean, you probably have experience more than myself, that there's aspects of Vedic culture there, and these aspects can help one immensely in Krishna consciousness. Much of course, we're Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Much of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, unfortunately, is now, fortunately or unfortunately, actually, much of Gaudiya culture, it's practiced and preserved, consequently, by many upper sampradayas, actually, which can be learned from, in one sense. Of course, it's mixed up with their own speculations and a misunderstanding of Shastra and Lord Chaitanya's message. But some things can be learned even from studying them, but it has to be filtered through Guru Sadhu and Shastra. So I'm just making the point central that this Vedic culture is not something antiquated. It's something you can very much still imbibe and still learn from. You probably have extensive experience. Srila Prabhupada, he wanted specifically devotees to come to India to learn Vedic culture because he knew this Vedic culture would help them. Whereas Srila Prabhupada consequently referred to the nasty Western civilization. His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami was giving a list of so many different terms Srila Prabhupada used to describe modern civilization, nasty civilization, dog civilization, hog civilization, worse than animal civilization. So many terms are there from Srila Prabhupada. So what is that? Yeah, that is also there. There's a few like that. There's a few terms like that. So this is Western civilization. I've been speaking about Vedic civilization. Then unfortunately, myself, I'm coming from a background of Western civilization. They're completely, almost as if opposite. Okay, before I get to that, I'll just speak a little bit about Vedic civilization more. So I've been saying all these, I'm not getting into so much details. I don't want to be pedantic about it, nor am I so learned in culture myself. But there's finer points of culture. And culture, generally when we think of culture, we think of arts, we think of music, we think of food, etc. like this. These are also aspects of Vedic culture, which should and hopefully will come with the reestablishment of Varnashram. We have aspects even here. We use, for example, kartal, mridanga, harmonium, which our acharyas have given us, which are aspects of Vedic culture. We have paintings and a style just like, of course, this is a style inaugurated by Srila Prabhupada. A few of our paintings, just like that one, is a little more traditional style of painting. So there's aspects of Vedic culture, even within our movement today. Many different things, not just aspects. It's predominated. But one point is that you can follow Vedic culture to the T, but if you're not Krishna conscious, it's completely useless, for lack of a better term. When Srila Prabhupada spoke about Vedic culture, of course the arts and things are there, but principally he meant that culture with that culture that has Krishna at the center, that he didn't necessarily get stuck in peripherals such as Ayurveda, dance, etc. He never particularly. In some places, Srila Prabhupada encouraged these things, but he only encouraged these things in so much as they helped one remember Krishna. So even the rigid following of Vedic culture is not beneficial if one isn't Krishna conscious. The Bhagavatam reaffirms this. As was quoted yesterday, Dharma svanushtata pumsam vishvaksana katasuyaha notpadya dyadi ratim shlama evahi kevalam. The occupational activities of a man performs according to his own position, varnashram dharma, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Another verse from the 11th canto, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was fond of quoting, I don't know offhand, Ya esham purusham sakshad atma prabhavam ishvaram na bhajanti avajananti stana brashta patenti adaha. If any of the members of the four Varnas and four ashramas fail to worship or intentionally disrespect the personality of Godhead, who is the source of their creation, they will fall down for their position into a hellish state of life. So even if you're a perfect Smarta Brahmana, perfectly following every aspect of so-called Brahminical culture, you're completely clean, completely pure. You can even know the four Vedas, but if you don't worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, according to the Bhagavatam, you'll fall down to hell. It's completely useless, this culture. Still, there's a caveat even to this, in that Vedic culture, even if one doesn't particularly worship Krishna, is still elevating. One may be a karma kandi, an actual karma yogi, we can say. Somebody who's actually, well, that's a little bit different, but say somebody's actually following karma kanda, as Krishna talks about in the Gita. They perform welfare activities for the benefit of all people. Actually for their own benefit, but in name, they're just following the Vedic injunctions. They may be digging wells. Srila Prabhupada, he gives a purport. They may dig wells and inaugurate communal projects, plant trees along paths. So they get pious activity for that, and they'll enjoy in heaven for that if they carry on like that. But Vedic culture is arranged in such a way that even by doing these things, they can be elevated by doing so. Not necessarily by the good karma they may enact, but say somebody plants a tree out of following the process of karma kanda, and a Vaishnava, a sadhu, comes along and he takes shelter of that tree from the hot sun. Now, the person that that planted that tree, they get benefit from that. They get agyata sukriti. So, which then opens up the gate for devotional service much later. There are so many aspects of Vedic culture which is like this. But many sacrifices, practically if not all, many of them, with many sacrifices within the Vedas, they prescribe feeding of brahmanas. They enjoin feeding of brahmanas, just like we hear after the Rajasuya Yajna. Maharaj Yudhishthira, he gave charity to the brahmanas. I don't know if he's particularly fed the brahmanas there, but feeding the brahmanas, giving charity to the brahmanas, same thing. So this aspect, so giving to the brahmanas is good. Brahmanas are dear to Lord Vishnu. What to speak of charity is given to a Vaishnava brahmana. So these aspects of Vedic culture, they can help one advance even unknowingly. This is the beauty of Varnashrama Dharma. I'll just briefly speak about Western culture. So Western culture is the exact opposite as demoniac. It's centered around sense gratification, generally. Vedic culture and Vedic ideals you'll find, even today, actually, and in this book, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life, this same point is made about the communities in Bengal. Bengalis are particularly community-oriented. Not just Bengalis, generally I've found is that, and it seems to be, even all over India, Vedic culture is such that it's more community-oriented. It is an idea of serving the community or group as a whole. Whereas in Western culture, it's just the opposite. The mentality in Western culture is to hell with the group. It's a culture of individualism based upon facilitating one's own sense gratification. People want to be a very great man in society. They want to become educated, learned. They want to make a name for themselves. There's not really an idea of, I'm a part of something greater. Just like, I don't want to tangent off into something else, but the whole issue with the environmental problem. People don't give a damn about the environment in Western culture because the culture is such. When you throw away something, say when you throw away a plastic bottle, you have no consciousness of what it does to the community as a whole. There's no idea whatsoever. No consciousness of what to speak of even what's going on within the city. But within Vedic culture, it's exactly like that. Just like we were hearing yesterday when the king, I was reading yesterday, when the king announced, when Maharaj Yudhishthira announced his kingdom, all the citizens became very, very upset that Maharaj Yudhishthira was there. Even when Dhritarashtra left, Dhritarashtra, I mean, a lot could be said about his character, but still the citizens were very concerned that Dhritarashtra was going to the forest. Western civilization is like, who cares? Some people don't even care who the... they don't even know who the mayor of the city is. But in Vedic civilization, it's much more focused on this communal aspect. There's a sense of, I should serve the community like this. Among so many other different things. This is just one of many, but the central point is that within Vedic culture, succinctly put, the center is Krishna, an ideal original Vedic culture as it is. The center is Krishna, whereas this nasty Western culture, the center is one's own personal sense gratification. At the same time, inevitably, when we spread Krishna consciousness, we're not fanatic, to use that concept I said. Spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, it means inevitably adapting to local culture. Just like Srila Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, to give a poor paraphrase of the term, you can't immediately take what's practiced in India or in one situation in the world and just put it in another situation in the world and expect it to work just flawlessly as it is. The customs and ideals of one country are different from another country, and consequently one has to adapt. So inevitably Krishna consciousness will adapt based upon the local culture. It's inevitable. You can't how things are practiced in India, you can't expect things to be exactly the same as in America or elsewhere within the world. Even by way of just practicalities, it's impossible. Srila Prabhupada, when he was once asked, how can a crocodile of the Nile swim in a German lake? In other words, how can you expect to transplant Indian culture here in Germany? And Srila Prabhupada replied to that question, you can be Krishna conscious in suit and tie. So, I'm talking all these things, but at the same time, there's also adjustments in Krishna consciousness. There's adjusting based upon time, place, and circumstances. We don't do away with these things. There's no particular harm in adopting some facets of Western culture, as long as the essential philosophy and usages of Krishna consciousness remain. And of course, this is done not whimsically, but according to previous acharyas, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, simply put. And this has been done historically, just like we wear these kurtas. These kurtas, traditionally, if you look at these paintings, we don't see Lord Chaitanya wearing a kurta or Krishna wearing a kurta. Veda culture, traditionally, it means chadar, or uttariya, actually, wearing like that. Chadar is a more recent adoption, particularly our acharyas have done so we also do so. And even if you go back even more, you look at, for example, the temples of Vrindavan. They're influenced by Mughal architecture. It's undoubtable. It's unquestionable. Even within modern Indian culture today, you see that much of language, cuisine, architecture, etc., even things like poetry, dance, is influenced by some elements of Muslim, specifically Mughal culture. But still, it's remained distinct. So it's possible for Krishna consciousness to integrate facets of local culture, but still remain distinct without becoming merged within the two. Of course, it's sort of a gray area. This is why it's necessary to follow, to do so, based upon Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Otherwise, you can water the whole thing down, as has been seen. Srila Prabhupada himself, or our acharyas, has sanctioned such accommodation. We can say, just like I was giving the example of a kurta. I was previously talking about harmonium. Harmonium is not a Vedic instrument. It's a German and French instrument, one of the two, I forget. But our acharyas have approved. Well, okay, there's differing opinions. Obviously, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he didn't particularly like harmonium, nor did Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Other Gaudiya Vaishnavas were using it, but Srila Prabhupada introduced it. He himself played harmonium. Amongst other things, Srila Prabhupada also introduced, he allowed Western dress, or he said, as I quoted earlier, you can be Krishna conscious in suit and tie. He similarly allowed Western dress, allowed devotees to dress in Western dress to go and preach in, which is unprecedented in the Gaudiya line. So it's not that we're just completely one-sided or the other. There are adjustments, and these things can help. Being too, niyamagraha, being too strict on these things, being too rigid or inflexible, it's also not. Veda culture is good for Krishna consciousness. It's conducive towards Krishna consciousness, but being too rigid towards trying to practice that which is not practical, it's also not good for Krishna consciousness. Just like if we go to, if you go to Sweden and you say, well, our acharyas didn't wear, Lord Chaitanya didn't wear a kurta, he didn't wear jackets, so I'm just going to dress in a chadar. Actually, we see pictures of Lord Chaitanya, generally he just has it around his shoulders. So if you go bare-chested and somewhere where it's freezing, you're not going to have a very good time. So you have to be practical. Interestingly, this is just a side point. This was, Srila Prabhupada, interestingly, when he first came to America, he didn't wear kurtas. If you look at, I'm not saying we shouldn't wear kurtas, I'm just pointing it out. It's an interesting note. When he first came to America, you see pictures of him in 1966. He wore chadars. And you see in 26 2nd Avenue, there's famous pictures of him in front of the store for it. Even when it was cold, he would wear a heavy woolen chadar. He later started wearing a turtleneck that his disciples gave him. And then later he started wearing kurtas. So that's just a tangential point I thought to mention. Initially, he was wearing chadars, interestingly. So I'm speaking all this, and there are people, obviously, there's an elephant in the room. There are people who obviously reject Vedic culture almost in total, that anything having to do with Indian culture is Vedic culture. We're not going to differentiate the two. Anybody having to do anything with this sort of culture, it's abhorrent. And this mentality particularly comes from the fact that they themselves haven't really imbibed the culture of Krishna consciousness, obviously. For those who are raised in one culture, the practices, beliefs, and everything about another culture, generally they seem abhorrent to another person. Just like it's common, Westerners, they have a very negative view of China, of India. They view them as backward because the culture is completely different. Similarly, too, in India, just the same. Although in India, it's a little bit different. Now the Western culture has become as if a paragon, which would to be followed all over the world. But Those who try to accept the essential practices of Krishna consciousness, hearing and chanting about Krishna, while rejecting you could say, externals, although it's more than just externals, as I've talked about, they deprive themselves of the purification that Vedic culture offers. And of course, I'm not getting into the details here, but Vedic culture, as Srila Prabhupada writes in the 10th canto of the Bhagavad, I haven't really spoken so much about Krishna. The verse today is about Krishna's smile, how his body is complete Satchidananda. But you see, even in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and 10:13, as the Brahma Vimohan Leela, even during this section of the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada is writing about the necessity of instituting Varnashram culture. How about instituting Varnashram culture? It brings one, quoting from the first canto, second chapter, it brings one from the lower modes of tamas and rajas to the mode of sattva gun, and from the mode of sattva gun, you can consequently rise to the mode of shuddha sattva. So I'm not trying to be unique in doing this. Srila Prabhupada also did this. He spoke much on Vedic culture, and he emphasized Vedic culture. So, because it purifies oneself in many different ways. Srila Prabhupada said if one follows the Brahminical culture means Vedic culture, he'll become competent in Krishna consciousness. By being refined in Vedic culture, we can become ideal devotees of Krishna. By understanding the finer points of Vedic culture, we can serve Krishna better. It's not by discarding these things. We can be Krishna conscious to some extent, but it may limit us, and we may be conditioned by our own background. Just to give an example, Janmashtami is coming up. Now, you could offer Krishna on his birthday pizza, a birthday cake, French fries. You could do that. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if one offers me with love and devotion a fruit, flower, leaf, or water, I will accept it. But a key point about this verse is that Krishna says, if one offers me with love and devotion. Now, if you have love and devotion for somebody, and their favorite things are ladus, kheer, chapatis, shak, shukta, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes, and you make them pizza, you must not have what sort of love and devotion is that? If you have love and devotion for somebody, say somebody can't take milk, and I've cooked them a bunch of sweet rice on their birthday, would they be very satisfied if I say, out of my love and devotion for you, I've cooked this thing that you don't like at all? Is that very nice? Now you can do so. I'm not condemning that offering cakes to Krishna. Cakes were devotees offered cakes to Srila Prabhupada, and he gladly accepted those cakes. In 1976, there's one instance in 1972. I'm not being polemic up here, but I'm just making the point that if we imbibe these aspects of Vedic culture, Vedic culture is dear to Krishna. If we follow these aspects, we also become dear to Krishna. Krishna likes when we follow Vedic culture. Krishna likes when we offer him things which he likes, which are within the Vedic culture. So I'm running short of time. I have a few more points, but just succinctly, upbringing within this culture, it helps one immensely. Kalki Prabhu was making the point yesterday. Education is immensely important. For those not raised within Vedic culture, Krishna consciousness can be very, very difficult. And as we've heard many times, culture acts as if a safety net for one, a behavioral net, we can say, for one to fall back on. Just like I was speaking to some Gurukulis, actually some older Gurukulis in India, and they were saying that even like they'll it's just natural for them to like avoid women. I mean, avoid women not in a misogynistic way, but in the sense that they keep a distance. Of course, in Vedic culture, when many things could be said, but there's not much time. Just for example, when a man and woman cross ways in Vedic culture, they keep a wide distance between each other. They don't look at each other, and they don't say anything to each other. And that's considered very respectful. It's a mutual acknowledgement, a mutual showing of respect towards one another. Vedic culture is just the opposite. It's considered very, very rude and impolite to do so. In Western culture, it's just the opposite. It's considered very, very rude to do so. And so they were saying how, it's just natural, these Gurukulis, among so many other things they were telling me, it's just natural for them to behave with women in this way. It's very conducive to Krishna consciousness, to have a respectful attitude towards the opposite sex. It keeps you falling down, as we've seen, as Western devotees, unfortunately have a problem with, myself included, with desire for illicit sex, amongst other things. So this upbringing in Krishna consciousness, it prepares one to accept Krishna consciousness. And it prepares one to stay in Krishna consciousness. We see, for those people who are raised in Krishna consciousness, who have particularly those who have a very strong sense of Vedic culture, from the beginning, generally I see they stay in Krishna consciousness. Whereas, even though those who are raised in Krishna consciousness, who have not so much imbibed the culture, not being imparted the culture so much, they may even go outside of Krishna consciousness, or if they stay within Krishna consciousness, it's sort of on the fringes. Whereas, if those who have a very strong sense of the culture of Krishna consciousness, Vedic culture means the culture of Krishna consciousness. They tend to stay within Krishna consciousness. That applies for those who are raised within the culture. It applies for ourselves as well. If we accept this culture, this is why it's so important for devotees to adopt these things. It's not just a show. It helps our own Krishna consciousness. So there's other points, but that's kind of like the essence of it all. I can end my class at this point. So effectively, in summation, this culture, Krishna is spiritual. Everything related to Krishna is spiritual. His culture is also spiritual. So we should take up this culture and we'll be benefited if we so do. So I can end there, or whatever 10 minutes remaining time we have. I can take questions or comments anybody may have. Yes.
I'd like to add one point about stitched clothes.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that in Vedic culture they didn't wear stitched clothes. In fact, stitched clothes were actually quite common. Specifically, Brahmanas avoided wearing stitched clothes as far as possible. Here's from Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is Shrikanta, one of the sons of Shivananda Sen. Nephew. Shivananda Sen's nephew Shrikanta, the son of his sister, felt offended and he commented on the matter when his uncle was absent. This is after Shivananda Sen was kicked by Lord Nityananda Prabhu. And then Shrikanta, who was only a boy, left the group and traveled on alone to the residence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Shrikanta offered obeisances to the Lord, he was still wearing his shirt and coat. So the word Petangi Gai Kare Dandavat Namaskar, and it's transferred Petangi, shirt and coat. Therefore, Govinda told him, my dear Shrikanta, first take off these garments. Then Prabhupada comments, one is forbidden to enter the deity room or offer anything to the deity while wearing a shirt or coat. Anyways, and then in the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 26, Srila Prabhupada writes, there are generally 4 kinds of garments on the body of Krishna: his shirt, turban, belt, and wearing garments. In Vrindavan, he used to put on reddish garments with a golden shirt on his body and an orange-colored turban on his head. So, stitched clothes were there. I'm just making this point because it's an important misconception that is propagated by a certain group of devotees who identify themselves as Krishna West, who say that stitched clothing is an influence of Muslim culture. That is wrong. Stitched clothing was there in Vedic culture. And it is one of the reasons why women don't traditionally go on the altar.
I see.
Because women wear stitched clothing in general. Women wore stitched clothing. Although there are ways in which women can wear completely unstitched clothing, and they wrap themselves. You can find this even now in some places in South India. Some Brahmin ladies, they have no stitched clothes on their body. It's just one long sari that goes around wrapped in different ways. But anyways, in general, stitched clothing was very much allowed, especially for women. And then some men, kids used to wear, as you can see Shivananda Sen's boy wore. I'm not sure what caste Shivananda Sen was.
I don't know.
Kings would wear. Kings would wear.
Yeah, that's true.
Kshatriyas would wear. Royal, even when they're not in battle, they all wore. It was a sign of royalty, again, which is why Brahmanas avoided it, because it was opulent. But Vaishyas would wear. As you can see, Krishna is wearing all the turban, all these kind of things. But generally, Brahmanas avoided. And Shudras avoided because they didn't have it was considered a kind of an opulence in some ways. But just making that point that stitched clothing is not alien to Vedic culture. That's the only thing I just wanted to make that point. Yeah.
Interesting. This is just tangential because you mentioned that. Interestingly, at least when I went to Shankaracharya Mutt and Kanchi, they won't let anyone within the premises if you're wearing stitched clothing still.
No, it's same thing. If you go to Kerala, you have to remove your shirt. You've been to temples where you've been forced to take your shirt off? Yeah, you have to take your shirt off. You have to go. Actually, and that's because here, it's very interesting quote. Yeah, in that Prabhupada quotes here that he quotes from the Tantras. Vastrenavrita dehastu yo narah praname dharim switri bhavati mudhatma sapta janmani bhavini. Anyone who offers respects and obeisances to the deity while wearing garments on the upper portion of the body is condemned to be a leper for 7 births. Now, Srila Prabhupada, the way he explained that is you shouldn't have stitched clothing. The Sri Vaishnavas, however, say no clothing. So you will see pujaris, Sri Vaishnava pujaris, they never wear anything on the top. They only tie it around the waist, yeah. They wear it when they're off the earth, they tie it. And when you enter the temple, you take your shirt, you tie it on your waist. Anyways, but it's a different, yeah. Yeah, the Brahmin thread is considered as upper garment. Guru Maharaj once said that. I don't remember where I heard it from him, but yes. Without that, because of that, Brahmana can go without a shirt, and it's considered like okay. Actually, Dvijas, because all Dvijas have it.
Kshatriyas, yeah.
Kshatriyas wear silk thread, Vaishyas wear woolen thread. Guru Maharaj gave Vaishya initiation to the devotee in Leicester. Anyways. Cotton.
I was just saying that thinking in terms of preaching, like at least I've noticed generally when like there's places seems like where there's like Western dress, but then there's that whole attitude and mood of this like being too relaxed with Krishna consciousness.
Yeah,
that seems to be like a super prominent thing. It's like there's like where you keep the dress. Generally, I mean, I notice it myself. That's why it's like if I'm in a Western dress, and if I'm preaching, then there's definitely a difference of like the way they look at you, the way you present things.
Yeah, definitely.
Your whole
actually, when people see you, particularly Western, when they see this, they respect you.
But
if it's just you're in jeans, it's just like some
some other guy,
some random,
especially
dude,
with women.
Yeah,
because there's an immediate level of like kind of line drawn that. Hey, you can't approach. This is like a whole. Even if you want to approach us, you have to be one of us in order to like even try. But if you're in pants and shirt, and then there's like there's a more or less access. Okay, what doors? There's a level of exchange that is different to when you're in a dress. So Muslim women like to wear their dress. Yeah, because you see Muslim women, it's like even when you're calm, it's like hell no. It's like there's no way that you'll ever even try to even approach them. So it seems like it's the same thing when you're in a dress of a devotee. Then even like that connection with women there's a level of separation that's created when you're talking to others. They know that they can't just talk nonsense around you. A lot of Westerners, they say when they like cuss, they'll say sorry when they're talking to you because they realize this person's a holy person. I can't just like say whatever the hell I want to say. Yeah. So it does seem to be like the way I've seen it, like favorable preaching in the sense that it presents to us people who are actually like interested in Krishna consciousness, interested into something.
Yeah, it attracts people who are actually like, serious. I mean, it's just like the same example. When you want a policeman, you go for a policeman. When I was in Florida just recently, some older woman actually, she was like 60 or so. She came up to me and started talking about asking like what I do, etc. Like how I found like she was super interested actually. It wouldn't have happened if I was in Karmi dress. She would never know.
They like it.
So.
When we go to the Walmart, I'm walking around, they're like, man, I love your dress. It's like, where'd you get that? What if, like, people walk in here and say, I want to buy that dress. Like, it's happened so many times. The first time they see it at Walmart, they're like, man, where can I buy that? Like, because they'll buy the books and say, where do I get that? And they'll ask us for, like, where to buy. I was like, bro, huh? Soon. Yeah. I was like, generally they like do tell me you can't wear orange, you wear white. It's like, all right, no problem. I just want that. So it's just interesting that actually people are attracted by it too. It's not that. There's this whole, and my feeling being on the field and actually preaching is that it's a big mental concoction that you need to be in a Western dress to actually preach. Unless it's like a situation in where in a country you're gonna get like, prosecuted for like posing as a religious leader. But then in the Western world, like, I don't know, I just, from my experiences, I just don't notice the big difference between, I notice the difference in a good way, like being in this dress, but like, Western dress, I don't see it like conducive at all to my own Krishna consciousness and to the others. I don't know, that's just kind of what I've like experienced.
Yeah, it just seems like complete sense gratification sometimes. It's like some people are so like hell bent against like us separating from the opposite gender, like and to them, that's like fanatical or it's too much. And you made like this really good point that in the West, there's this like this conditioning of like separating like culture, like from like science,
Everything's
religion.
departmentalized in the West.
That's a really good point. Like psychology,
Yeah, psychology, sociology, everything. If there's something you can think of, there's a study of that.
yeah. It's like, and so like they funnel that, like they dovetail that on like to when they look towards like Vedic culture, and they have like some mundane position. They completely separate it, And I met this, like for instance, we met this one person devotee like in UK, and he was just like basically yeah I know your guru, like it's cool, but like he's like I think he's on the wrong side of history, basically. And then
Of history.
I meant to tell you that. But anywho, he's like really like, but anywho, he was like that. This is like interesting. He's like the first guy you like greet like when you come to the temple. But he's like, yeah, I just think he's on the wrong side of history, And then he brought up the female Diksha Guru thing, and then I was like, well, we're just. We're following Vedic culture. And then he was like, well, no, we're not following Vedic culture. We're like following like time, place, and circumstance, with like little like tinges of Vedic culture, but it's like time, place, and circumstance. And then like that point you said about like, I brought up like Prabhupada wanted his disciples to come and learn the Vedic culture and this and that. But it seems like in like these people who like, they accept that Krishna is absolute. They accept even Shastra, but to basically justify their disagreement with Shastra, they use like Prabhupada's application of like time, place, and circumstance to like justify all of this.
The fact they don't want to accept.
And it'd be one thing if they were Pukka, but they're usually never Pukka. They're usually like they're never like half the time they're not even wearing a dhoti, or have the hair growing out or whatever. But it just seems like complete sense gratification because everything in Vedic culture reminds you of Krishna. Like if you touch your foot to someone and then you put you touch them and put it to your head, it's a reminder that they're a Vaishnava. Or like if you put your hands in your mouth and you should be Suchi, reminds you should be clean, for like worship a deity and all these things, But it's like these people, they're so like, it just seems like they're so attached to sense gratification more than anything. Like you said, there's no, it seems like genes, like mixing with the opposite sex. It just doesn't make any sense why that would be conducive to Krishna consciousness at all. And they do it in the name of time, place, and circumstance, which is so annoying. And they can use like Prabhupada's, like all these things to like justify all this, So anyway, like, what do you say to such a person, who like does this, it's like time, place, or circumstance, It's
my experience is they're set in their own ways. They don't want to change. You can preach to the innocent. I gotta go over there because otherwise it's already over time and then it's not fair to them. Anything from the Mataji side? Questions or comments? No? I'm gonna end it. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Sorry. gonna take a nap? Or you just wanna
I might just take. I was thinking just taking that.
To the university, you go like this?
Yeah. Vedic culture.
Because I've seen some pictures.
Yeah.
Some places you cannot go like.
Sometimes you have to be a little undercover. Take this. Put on the chair. I remember we did a thread for give me a thread for you was uncivilized. No, he gave his you your charter. He gave this thing